Welcome to the Drummer Mindset Podcast. I'm Joel Pereira. Today I share my episode with Alan Hall. Alan is a teacher that I found and took lessons from earlier this year. Conversations with him and lessons from him are a big part of the reason that I started this podcast. He has been a professional drum teacher for over 40 years. After attending Berklee College of Music, he also taught there. Also taught at California Jazz Conservatory and various camps around California. He's written books on drumming. He's been a professional performer for over 45 years, just recording with all kinds of international jazz artists, touring all over the world. These days, you can catch him at Little Jumbo playing with Jay Sanders and Zack often on Tuesday nights, and then also his own outfit, Asheville Jazz Collective, where he's the composer as well. And it's always something unique with that group, or with both those groups. Enjoy. Well, can you share your arc? Like, how did you find drumming?
A big part of it is I had three older sisters.
Uh-huh.
I now have one, but I had three, and so there was always music in the house, Mm-hmm. And my mother played piano, so there was always music. And they were listening to the Beatles, the Monkees, Paul Revere and the Raiders, all that shit. Shindig was this TV show. I was in the house. Music was in the house, and I don't know, like when I took the drums, I've been playing. I remember when I was like maybe 6 or 7, maybe 8. My sister just above my age, Leslie, we would play for the local kids. We'd put on a radio.
Uh-huh.
She'd play a tennis racket.
Uh-huh.
And I'd play, those cardboard pieces of hangers that you take off.
Sure.
I'd play those cardboard pieces on boxes, and we would have the kids over, and they'd dance, and we would play. So that's my earliest recollection of being a drummer. And then I actually started taking classes in 5th grade at the public school. So mm-hmm. I guess it's my official entree into the thing. And, seeing the Gene Krupa movie.
Okay.
Gene Krupa story.
Yeah. I've never watched that movie.
Oh,
but...
you got to check it out, man. Sal Mineo.
Yeah.
Woo! That blew my mind. And my parents got me a drum set, like a toy drum set, paper.
Uh-huh.
I was fairly young, but I guess they knew early on that's what I wanted to do. Even before I was in school, I had this toy drum set, which my brother punched a hole through one morning accidentally.
So 3 sisters and a brother?
Then 2 brothers.
Two brothers. Okay.
I was the oldest of the boys. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, when did I commit to it? I think I started taking drum lessons in 5th grade at school, primarily because I thought walking around with a pair of drumsticks in my back pocket would be super cool.
Totally.
Come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So then I was in the school band from then on, throughout, all the way through college.
Uh-huh. And was that like a concert band?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any marching at all for you?
Not at that point. So that was 5th grade. When I got to high school, we did some lame marching. We were, I was a section leader, and we did this, march on the field and make a right turn and stop and play and make it minimal. And then, concert band, and I think I was in I was in a stage band pretty early on in school, 6, 7, certainly middle school. I was in the stage band, and I started my first band. I was 13. I joined a band called Los Unicos in San Jose, California, which is like a Mexican rock and roll presentation ranchera band.
Okay.
And we did some Santana and Malo, nice. Tower of Power, and traditional stuff for weddings. And that was my first professional gig. Then competitions through the school programs,
mm-hmm.
The county-wide stage band competition or concert band competition. I always entered into those. And then I started taking privately, 8th, 9th grade. And then my teacher, Dick Carlo from San Jose, California, he had me compete in the Percussive Arts Society stuff. PS, and it was the 8 Western States competitions.
Okay.
When I was in high school, I had joined a local community college big band.
I don't know a lot of community colleges with big bands.
Yeah, it was unusual. San Jose Community College.
Uh-huh.
In San Jose, California, they had a really strong band program. I mean, there were a lot of schools, a lot of bands. It was a strong concert, jazz program. Everything was going on there. So I joined that college band, and then I met that director, Dave Eshelman, a big, important person in my life. And I started doing these professional jazz gigs.
Okay.
As a drummer with my middle school teacher.
Okay.
Tony Niagara hired me to do some, wedding. It was probably 9th grade. So I've been at it a long time.
And what did you think of the gigs themselves versus like going out for paid gigs? What was that like versus the gigs you had done, like the shows that you had done
Amazing.
before?
Wow. Making money.
And people were there to like dance and party, right? Like they weren't sitting down listening to like a review of old standards, right? Like
And then you can imagine, your middle school teacher hires you to be the drummer in his band. I mean, what a boost to your ego,
Totally.
We talk about confirmation and that support, like, wow. So from there, let's see, some original bands, and I was with that band, Los Únicos, throughout middle school and into high school.
Oh, wow.
My dad used to drive me to the gigs sometimes, drop me off.
And everybody was of the same age, it sounds like.
Well, I was the baby, for sure.
Okay.
And
is that like a common theme for you?
It was for most of my life. I was the baby of the band. It's no longer the case.
Is that the case for you with your siblings too? Like, where are you in that order?
I'm the 4th of 6 kids.
Okay. So, kind of younger.
Yeah.
But you had some power over the younger ones, though, too.
Well, heck yeah.
Right.
I was the first of 3 boys. Come on, the first boy in the family. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So then from there, eventually I went up to after high school, I got into Berklee College of Music, and then I started really getting more involved in creatively challenging stuff.
Yeah. So you were in the community college big band like while you were in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I started. I did some community college before I went to Berklee.
Got it.
A year or 2, and I was still in the band there, and other bands, still doing competitions. I finally won first place in my division. I competed with Chad Wackerman at one time.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I didn't win.
And so what was Berklee like compared to, I mean, because it sounds like, early on, like you were competitive at a young age.
Yeah.
People were calling on you for gigs and stuff like that. Was there a big shift at Berklee?
Big time. Kick in the butt.
Yeah.
Big fish, little pond, San Jose. I get to Berklee, and, I'm just one of the fairly mediocre, talented young guys, but there's guys who play circles around me when I got there.
And when you say mediocre, is it just for skills that you had
No,
obtained?
I've always felt like I've had a talent for drumming. Mm-hmm. You get to Berklee and you've got, the monsters went there.
Sure.
Tommy Campbell was the drummer there.
Okay.
When I got there. Tane Watts was there for a while. Just guys with Cindy Blackman. I studied with Alan Dawson for a while. But anyways, you get these cats who are just they've got far more natural talent. And so you got to get humble a little bit and say, okay, well, I'll do what I can. But I still found my people. I found my groups. People hired me there. Mm-hmm. And I was still working. Then I joined wedding band. So I was married at the time. Just a whole nother story.
Pretty young.
When I went to Berklee, I had married a woman older than I who had kids.
Okay.
I basically went to Berklee at about 18, 19 as a stepfather.
Okay.
Big mistake. But, so I was a little bit limited what I can do. I had I had to make money and support this family.
Mm-hmm.
So I had certain choices I had to make. So I was joining wedding bands and doing that kind of stuff, you know. Got to make your money and having creative project on the side.
You always made time for that creative project, though, huh?
Yeah, well, luckily it kept coming. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
big part of for me. That's where most of my energy is now.
I mean, that's got to be difficult. You're in school, you're a stepdad, you're gigging, and you got that creative side. Did you get much sleep?
I guess I got enough. I got through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What when you kind of discovered what size fish you were at Berkeley? Like, was it like back to the drawing board for you, or were those gigs your practice too?
I just got into being a student. I learned as much as I could. I worked with some of my teachers were okay, some were great. You know, I started learning percussion, mallets, classical percussion. I just was a student, and a working student who was gigging. And then the teachers at Berkeley started calling me for gigs.
Oh wow!
So I was always, you know, I mean, I wasn't the super top superstar, but I was in a level where getting noticed and getting good calls. So I felt pretty like I was, you know, doing okay. But the blend of those things. Yeah, I managed to keep at it, and no one pressured me to get out of it.
Yeah.
Luckily. I mean, I've always had partners that were like supportive of what I do.
Okay.
So,
so you mean no one? It wasn't. You're not talking about teachers. You're talking about like your support systems.
My support system.
Yeah.
Get real. None of that crap. You know, no one's gonna tell me to not be a drummer. Thankfully, my mother and my father were supportive. So I got through that, and then eventually they asked me to teach at Berklee College of Music. I was one of the busier guys in town. Then that turned into a whole nother thing, and I've been teaching for forever. So yeah, teaching the whole time, playing. It's what I've been doing, teaching and playing my whole life.
Yeah.
Luckily, I guess.
And was that the first time teaching though? Was Berkeley, or were you like teaching any lessons when you were a kid? Or?
I was teaching people in my drum section when I was in high school, and then I got some local teaching gigs at various schools as a high school student and as a college student. I was always teaching. Yeah, one of my elementary school teacher, Chuck Heller. I was teaching his son drums.
Mm-hmm.
So my teachers asked me to teach their kids, you know.
Yeah.
And so I always did that. That was always a sort. And then I would, you know, join various Needham public schools, Boston Latin Academy. You know, I was adjunct teacher in these various little schools. There's
something that. Like you said, just as far as like the talent pool, right? And like the natural talent. And I've been learning a little bit more about kind of a growth mindset perspective, right? Like there's this book by Carol Dweck. She's a PhD psychologist, researcher. And it's all about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? And so she brings the point to like, how much natural talent is really involved in anything. She brings it to question, right?
Brings it to question.
Yeah. She would argue, like, she brings up like several athletes or several CEOs that have fixed or growth mindset. Michael Jordan, right? And apparently, per this book, he gets like upset when people talk about him just having natural talent because he's worked his ass off.
Yeah.
And what he had was like, and he wasn't the natural talent. Like he tried to get into NC State, not UNC, right? He didn't make the cut. He didn't make first cut several times. And it was his brother that was a better basketball player.
Really?
So it was like all this friction, all that is the power of negative thinking, right? Like he's just super competitive.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what drives him to practice more than anybody.
That's very interesting.
And so,
yeah.
And it's like, and then you've got other people, you know, she would bring up, what's the tennis player that just has a hot head? McEnroe. Natural talent. And I mean, she's not saying there's not natural talent.
Okay.
But as far as the success goes,
So that's not the only thing that's
right. But look at him, right? Like he's like throwing stuff. He's blaming everybody else. He's blown up relationships. Like he's not well thought of, right? And he says he never really loved the game, but it was all that push from his father. And so it was like all this natural talent, and he would be crushed.
Coupled with an oppressive father, and
right.
who knows what else, right?
Well, and that's the argument, is like this upbringing with the fixed mindset.
Well, the fixed mindset is
so that's like so a fixed mindset would be like, oh, you're smart, like you can breeze through these tests, you're smart. Where the rubber hits the road is like, what do we do with this now? Well, like in parenting, or even in the way that we talk to each other, instead of saying like, you're a great drummer, it's more like, I can tell you've been practicing. I can tell you really get into this music and you've been working on it really hard. And her studies show when you compliment or praise the work or the action as opposed to the status, then it improves performance. And what they found too was like the kids that they did these studies, these large studies over several hundred students. So a group got fixed mindset praise, or like that status praise. And then the other group got like the action praise, like you're doing good work. And what they found was the people that got the status praise, like they are the identity praise, like you are smart, were more likely to cheat, take fewer challenges, and do more poorly in the future in general.
Than the ones
because they had to maintain this status or this identity of I'm smart. So if I get this answer wrong, it means I'm crushed. Whereas like the growth mindset would say, if you make a mistake, it's just another challenge to overcome. So it's like, and what struck me about it was, it's not just about how we talk to kids, but it's about how we talk to ourselves, and it's how we talk to other adults too. So like these daily affirmations of like, you're good enough, you're smart enough, doggone it, people, Stuart Smalley stuff from SNL.
Yeah.
Then it's like that actually can harm you.
Good. That's good.
And so,
Good.
And then it also brings like, so yeah, it's just kind of fascinating because there's no individual that is all one or the other. Like we all have a fixed mindset at points and a growth mindset at other points, or we can.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like paying attention to that and like checking yourself,
Yeah. So I'm reflecting upon what brought me to where I am, wherever that is. I would say the thing, about practicing and playing, it's just what I wanted to do. No one pressured me really to get in there and practice, man.
Right.
I'm going to play. I just went in there. I want to learn this. I just wanted to learn all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I would sit in there for hours. It was the interest that drove me to practice. And this is what makes it hard as a teacher, actually.
Yeah.
To see that that's not working for everybody, and I got to understand that.
Right. I bet.
What came to me is not the way for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I have this one student, a really young kid, and he's really talented. Picks up things. I mean, he's like 7 or something. He's picking shit up. Like, he's playing stuff I didn't play it till I was 11 or 12. He's playing at 7. And I'm praising him. You're a natural. He's natural. He's wow, that's good. But I should probably focus on the work. That was good work. You did good work there.
Yeah, maybe.
More so than I'm just blown away by wow.
I know, and that's the kind of the mind screw of it, is like, because it only seems supportive. It only seems supportive to like, and also you can see where that path goes, like because the kids want the praise, and when you say that stuff, it does give them a boost. It does in the moment. But long term, it can kind of work against itself.
But see, so I'm learning from this little kid.
Yeah.
He wants to be challenged. He wants me to challenge him. He won't say that, but I can tell. He doesn't want to just praise. He wants me to show him stuff he can't do.
Yeah.
So I'm learning from him.
Nice.
How to be a better teacher with this guy.
What do you say to these kids? And it's like, as opposed to saying, wow, you picked that up so fast. Right. You're so natural at it. You're putting a primacy on quickness and accuracy. And they're not always going to be that. Mm-hmm. The growth mindset response would be, oh, that was too easy for you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to waste your time. And then move on to like something more challenging.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you. I'm getting some tips here.
Good. Well, I mean, I'm just learning them too, you know.
Yeah, you're in the middle of parenthood.
You're right.
You're dealing with all these questions.
Yeah, time. And I had, you know, just in studying psychiatry, we learned this stuff within the past 10 years or whatever. And that's still what blows my mind is those details of like what can be and can't be. And also the fact that it doesn't just apply to how we talk to kids. Because a big part of what I'm trying to do now, and you've been a big part of that, taking several lessons from you, starting back in, I think, December or January 2022 to 2023, is like trying to change my brain and realizing like people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but the fact is neuroplasticity, that effect where you can change, you can learn new things, you can change your brain, stays with us throughout our life.
Right.
It just takes longer.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's where, you know, I was trying to kind of break through, like I knew it was there. I was getting a lot of frustration. But then what I also learned through all this stuff too is that moment of frustration, like when you've been practicing maybe a samba pattern or whatever it is, you just can't quite get it.
Yep.
But you're so close and you're so frustrated. Yep. You're ready to, like when I was a kid, throwing drumsticks through the sheetrock wall, right?
Right.
Like that's actually the sign that you're learning it.
Exactly.
That frustration. You see it every day.
All the time. You're right on the cusp. I'll give a kid, you're right on the cusp of this. I try not to give anyone something that I know they're not going to be able to do with some hardware. I say, you're not there yet, but you're right on the cusp. You're right there. And I'm usually right. They just, a little more time, mostly slow the fuck down.
Right.
Get your brain and your body to connect. Look at the notes as you play them.
Right.
And then you play it slow enough, you hear it. Oh, now you hear it correct. Now you don't have to look at it because now it's just like a sound. Now you can mimic the sound. You're not looking at anything anymore. Now you can go fast because it's just a sound you're making. You've
built that neurology, right? Like,
right.
You've built it. It's like a highway now.
Yeah, because I've been through this myself numerous times. When you're trying to learn stuff, that you just have to tear yourself down and you have to be humble and say, I cannot do this.
What was the last thing? Do you remember a lick or anything that you were trying to learn in this way? Anything recent?
Well, I remember one thing, and this wasn't recent, but this was a very good lesson for me. I had, when I was in school, the big thing was super fast sambas. Boom, boom,
yeah.
Sure. That was the sign that you're happening. And I always had struggle with that. I didn't have much volume with my foot, and then with that problem with my foot, my bass drum foot would bleed into my funk drumming because I could those two little 6E notes right next to each other. Mm-hmm. Frustrating as hell, and I just couldn't do it. And I finally this was years ago, I said, what is this fucking problem? And so I came up with some exercises for myself. I might have given you these, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. The jabs?
No, this is it's a couple things, but primarily it's these two little patterns, just foot-hand patterns, and you attach them to different sequences. So the first pattern, you're playing a hi-hat like this, and your bass drum's going, and bass and snare, gong cat cat, gong gong cat cat, gong gong cat cat.
Right.
So it's bass snare bass. So that's one idea. Boom cat cat gong.
Okay.
The next idea is 1, 2. Back gong gong cat snare bass snare bass. So you're always doing two bass drums next to each other.
Okay.
So then you put those in a bunch of various sequences. But the thing is, you have to, every stroke in your foot has to be super loud, full on.
Yeah.
Loud as crap. And so I would do that in within I don't know, 4 sequences, and my shins were burning. Oh, God.
You've definitely talked to me about burning shins before. You got to go through it. Is this all healed down?
Healed down.
Okay.
No, that's how I learned, and that's how I prefer to play. But there's other ways. But that's what did it for me. I had to go through that very painful and humbling process, and then finally the foot came together, and I realized that's what it is. You got to strip it down to basic.
So slow you can't mess it up.
Yeah, I mean, so you go stupid slow, and in that case, stupid loud bass drum, and it worked. It's hard work, and you do it, and things improve. That's probably the thing I remember the most. There's always things I'm working on,
Yeah.
So
you got a lot of projects going on right now.
Yeah, I have my band. That's the main project is my band I'm writing for, and then I'm playing with different projects, But nothing's rehearsing except my band. We don't rehearse enough, but and I'm writing, so that's the big project. So in terms of my practice, I work on a lot of double bass drum stuff actually, and I'm not sure I'll ever use it, but that's what I'm working on that I'm finding interesting right now.
Okay.
A linear double bass drum in a linear context primarily.
Huh. So yeah. I went not long ago, I guess last year, I went to this festival and I got a chance to listen to it was like a forum with some of my favorite drummers, Antonio Sanchez,
yep.
Nate Smith,
yep.
and Micaiah McCraven. And they were telling a story about how Jack DeJohnette, one of them was chatting with him one day and he's like, yeah, I just got this double bass pedal. I'm learning, And it's he's been around a long time and he's still learning stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah. It can never be bored.
Right.
That's what's cool about it, for sure.
Yeah, because the rhythm is in everything, right? You can find it, you look for it.
Well, and there's always something you're not going to be able to do that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, one cannot be bored if they're really interested in growing as a drummer or a musician in general.
I had Mike Holstein on.
Yeah.
And he talked about he never really listened to jazz until he started playing it in school. And I thought that was funny. And I was like, wait, that's me too. That's exactly how it went. I didn't, I was already in this performing arts school, fine arts school. And we had all the different bands and stuff like that. Yeah. And it was awesome because it was it felt like mutual respect among all studies, whether it's cool. Performing, dance or whatever.
Imagine.
Everyone was supportive. Yeah, it was amazing school. I feel super lucky.
Yeah,
probably one of the best academic experiences of my career. But I always thought, the band was the coolest.
Because it is.
You're right. But I felt I remember I played trumpet. They had the drum set in the corner.
Okay.
And it's this old, I think it was a Ludwig. It sounded awesome when I would hear. We actually, we had some big players there, and when they would play it, it just sounded perfect,
Yeah.
And so, but they wouldn't let you play it unless you knew how to play it. It's I don't understand this. And apparently, this is a common thread. A lot of drummers experience this, or kids do. They have a drum set in the room, but there's only a specific time and place that you can ever play that, because it's loud. But I remember finally getting a chance because I did trumpet and then I also did percussion, and so they gave us an opportunity, and it felt kind of it came to me a little bit quicker than expected, as far as just the limb independence and getting a basic rock beat down.
Yeah.
And then it was and this was it for me because I like you banging on stuff as a kid, and I remember dressing up like a Motley Crue member or something like that for Halloween when I was in elementary school. And just having the drums and the drumsticks and stuff, just thought it was the coolest, So sure. It was it just fit with where I wanted to be. And it was at that point I got lessons, and then I really started trying for the jazz band, but I didn't really listen to any jazz. I just wanted to be in the band. And then I started learning a little bit more about some of the standard stuff that you learn about, just the idea of not being a jazz fan before you start playing jazz.
Yeah.
And then also realizing too, part of my hiatus from medicine was to focus on music again, because I always felt like that was the thing that I wanted to do, And then life happens in different ways. And I also have a lot of interests in general. And so, it's easy to get distracted or pull away and find other things and follow that interest in other ways. But in any case, I decided I was going to start going to like Little Jumbo as soon as like you. I think I had lessons with you before I even heard about that place.
Yeah.
And then going to all the different opportunities, and there's like a good number of opportunities in this area. Being in the audience of a jazz band, I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things, just to watch everybody and listen. But then on the records and stuff, it's like homework, Like
right.
I always felt like that identity piece was like, I must not really be a jazz fan if I can't just like geek out on these records.
Well, there are different levels of interest, So I have a lot of musicians I work with. These guys have been students of jazz like every album, every Blue Note album, every artist what songs they played on this album, and then that drummer was on that song, but then this guy did that. Like they're so studied the history of it, and some of them they memorized the solos, and they like this version. We're gonna do that version that was done in '56, not the one in '59. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, I've got caught up in those conversations before at Little Jumbo, just out in the audience. I'm like, I don't know.
I was never that kind of a student of it myself, and I think about it. I didn't listen to jazz before I played jazz.
Yeah,
I didn't either. I mean, the Gene Krupa thing was big. I was young. That was like cool, but so was Ringo.
Right.
And then later David Garibaldi and
Oh yeah.
Bobby Colomby and Blood, Sweat and Tears and Danny Seraphine. So I was into like the Chicago pop horn bands, And I was thinking about this, like what got me into jazz really, and it was a gradual process. And I think my first record I ever bought was Green Onion.
Okay.
Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs.
Okay.
So that was like a shuffle beat. Somehow I got a hold of some 78s from my grandfather or someone, and I could play 78s in my house, and then I had some Gene Krupa 78s, some Harry James 78s. So I was checking that stuff out. So I had listened to some of that. After I had been in the school band for a while, and then what got me in, what got me further into jazz was loving like these horn bands, and then Chuck Mangione. I was a big fan of Chuck Mangione, who then I found played with Art Blakey. Who's Art Blakey? And then I started getting to that stuff, and then you get to Berklee College of Music, and I was playing jazz songs before Berklee College. I was playing jazz gigs, standard jazz tunes. So I learned them as a professional necessity. But I never listened to it that much. However, no. Buddy Rich records. I did have Buddy Rich records.
Okay.
I guess I did listen to jazz. So yeah, but it wasn't I didn't go there first. I eventually worked into it.
Yeah.
Did you ever buy jazz records?
Did I? It's so interesting because like now that I think about like the records, like the opportunity for records and what I bought, like it's because I am of that age. Like I remember that I got cassettes first.
Okay.
So child of the 80s pretty much, born in 79.
Yeah.
And then so it was like Big Audio Dynamite, right? Like some punk stuff, Chili Peppers. Yeah. U2,
So your first
R.E.M.
records were not jazz?
No.
Did you ever buy a jazz record in your life, Joel?
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
Eventually you did.
But at some point, the point I was making was like then to CD, and then Napster hit when I was in college. So it was like, did I buy any records at all?
Of course.
Right? So everything kind of gets lost too. Like, and that's another thing that's an interesting point too, is like, I don't have a relationship with any records like I used to. Like I used to play like old Pearl Jam tapes or whatever on repeat, like, and just burn out the tapes. Like I had, that was something you could hold on to. It was yours. It was always there. Right. Whereas like now it's just, kind of this choice paralysis that happens. And like, where do you pull from now? Like it's just all happening at once.
Right.
And so, like, I've been so involved in that, and I was trying to think of like some of the definitely Buddy Rich. I had Buddy Rich albums, and watched Buddy Rich videos a lot, and then lately, I've got more like I'm following, trying to like make up for old times. So a lot of Elvin Jones stuff. The Jazz Messengers, some, Miles stuff, all that stuff. So definitely had, and then when I was younger too, Herbie Hancock and stuff like that too. And now it's like, Micaiah McCraven, which is definitely jazz, but he's got a backbeat aesthetic, but he's got real jazz chops too, and so he swings, and he's got some incredible players with him. So like, I listen to that repeatedly. And lately now though, it's mostly like soul records that I listen to.
It's whatever you're into.
But yeah, it's funny because like
I think I'm trying to think what did I listen to jazz because I had to, because I was playing in I think part of it was I was playing in these bands, in college at the big band, and some of my classmates were jazz, and we formed a jazz band, and Miles Davis, Philly Joe Jones. At some point I got into that stuff. I was way into Philly for a while,
and maybe there's something there, like maybe but that was not until Berkeley that you got into Philly Joe Jones.
Think about that, Philly Joe. It was probably at the tail end of high school that I got into Philly Joe, and that Miles record, Milestones.
And maybe that's the thing too, is like because a lot of times when I listen to that stuff, it's hard to. Sometimes the recordings are not as good. And
this was good quality recording.
Okay.
This was good. No, this was, as a teacher at Berkeley, I had to expose students to early bebop stuff, and some of that stuff was horrible recording, and it was hard to listen to. That's when I really started listening to that really old stuff, and it was like, can't really tell what's going on.
Right.
So yeah.
But I was just wondering though, like maybe like like your skills, in some cases I've heard this said, like where John Caldwell, who's a drum teacher, he talked about like his ears had to catch up to his hands.
That's
because he was playing a bunch of metal, and that's what he was listening to, and he could, like, his idea was like being a good drummer, you could play fast, accurately, and loudly. So he was like a train. And he was like, everyone else needs to meet my level of energy. And he's an energetic dude, right?
Okay.
But he said at some point, his ears caught up to his hands, and he was like broadening. And this was like a big part of like music school, I think, for him too, at UNC, Chapel Hill. And so he started learning a lot more in that regard. But in some cases too, like, I guess it's the same thing. It's like there can be like maybe like this leapfrog of like, you were already focused on learning a lot of the jazz chops, so that when you then heard it in these other albums, maybe then you like became more involved with it, because then you knew how to chunk it out. Like you knew what was going on more. Well,
there is a good way for me to think of this, like, who were my heroes and when?
Okay.
And so my heroes always determined what I was trying to do in my own practice.
Right.
So Buddy was an early hero, obviously. And so double stroke chops, I didn't have it, and then David Garibaldi was a hero.
Yeah.
So I started getting into his funk. It was always like, who would I like? What music did I like? Who was the drummer? Bobby Colomby, that was more jazz chops. And then Mike Shreve, Santana, that was power rock chop, all that. And I remember the first time I learned Soul Sacrifice,
Okay.
I learned sextuplets.
Okay.
Oh, wow, I could do sextuplets. Shit, how cool is that? And so I was doing these sextuplets it was middle school. I'd, play with a band, I'd get a solo, and I'd do my sextuplet, Mike Shreve shit. Yeah. Big leap. You have these leaps when you finally get something that you've been listening to for so long. And it just kind of keeps going from there. Then it was Steve Gadd, just like, what the fuck is he doing? Excuse my French. What's that about? I had no clue. I had to figure it out. Peter Erskine, Weather Report.
Yeah.
What's going on there? And so my taste, what was good about that period was, this is in the 80s, I was into these drummers who were the top of the field, who everyone was emulating at the time, and I was teaching. So it all fed itself, you know. I had to teach students what the new cats were doing. I had to learn what the older cats were doing, Gad, and I had to learn to teach. So I learned and I taught and I learned and I taught. And then this would trigger my own studies. I just want to keep going deeper into this, whether I teach it or not. So, and it was always Chick Corea, you know, big Matheny, all these guys. It was always about the bands and the music. John Zawin, oh my God. So the drumming I was trying to do was often linked to the bands I was digging.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it. And I think some people come at it a little differently than that.
But a lot of those guys, no doubt, were listening to like a lot of the jazz monsters before that, right?
Well, Gad was definitely influenced by Elvin Jones. Who wasn't, you know? Mm-hmm. But it's just a different sound, different types of drums. And then Weckel and all that.
How do you describe... So I had a recent music school grad in this seat not too long ago. They mentioned just kind of like the different patterns, like ride patterns that each individual has, almost like a fingerprint.
Right.
What is your experience with that? Like being able to pick
so
out
I know those guys. There are guys who like I can play like Jimmy Cobb. This is Jimmy Cobb ride. This is how Tony would ride. Mm-hmm. Never got into that kind of detail.
Yeah.
What I got was the overall vibe of the drummer.
Uh-huh.
The sound. You know, I can tell you who Tony is. I can tell you when I hear Elvin. I can tell you Bill Stewart. It's not so much specifics. To some degree it is, but they all have their own sound.
Yeah.
It's how they tune the drums. It's how they hit their drums, and I just love that when you can hear someone say, "Oh yeah, what's his name?" It's not this guy. It's that guy, specifically that guy. And then I could say, "Oh, this guy's copying that guy.
Yeah,
he's trying to be that guy."
Yeah.
And then I come to understand, the people, my heroes, were those guys who had their own sound. Mm-hmm. I guess Peter Erskine was an exception. At first, Peter Erskine struck me as someone who wanted to sound like Steve Gadd.
Okay.
God, I'm going to be shot in the head for this. Everyone was influenced by Steve Gadd. How can anyone even avoid it? And so I thought, he's kind of like a Steve Gadd guy. And I come to understand later, he was a different cat.
Yeah.
Different sound. And he didn't have that studio pressure on him like Gadd did to do all those pop records. So Gadd developed his sound partly because of his professional obligations.
Uh-huh.
I think that was part of what it was. It needed to be done that way in the studio.
Yeah. Like a lot of those like when I think of like Picaro or those guys, right? Like
studio ready.
Mm-hmm. I think for so many folks, especially too, thinking about the machine and kind of the advent of that, and like how people try to imprint some signature on a drum machine, which has been done, right? Like we've talked a little bit about Dilla before. You know, it's kind of interesting how you can pick out at least that style, even though it's with a drum machine that's probably been, affected in a way, it's modified or whatever. So it's just interesting to think about, those fingerprints that happen, because sometimes people, I say this quite a bit, like you read on the message boards, like looking for a timekeeper, and it's just, and I know like that's said probably tongue in cheek, like when people are looking for a drummer for hire, but at the same time, it's funny because it's partially true. Right. Yeah. And so it's just interesting to think about it that way and to try to take on more of like this idea. No, you're not just bringing the time, like you're bringing your sound and your feel. Right.
Yeah. But it's also like you're bringing your sound, your feel within certain constructs that we determine.
Sure.
We don't want a fucking soloist here. We want you to lay it down, baby,
Yeah. And there's still and there's art within the confines, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's what creates some of the best stuff. Like you got to know your limits and know where you can play within it.
Right.
And like own the groove, own the pocket, whatever. Play with it and see what you can get away with maybe, but don't do anything overt. That's something I've been working on lately. It's just, and maybe I'm trying to like reconcile my own identity. Like when my dad sent me video of me playing jazz band in high school. I was like, I do not want to watch this, but I did anyway.
Good.
And and the band sounded terrible, but my timing was good.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, I'm like, and like I was like just listening to it. It's like very even. Like I'm in pocket. My fills were like not great, but I never lost the one. I think, and the fills weren't great just because they weren't there. Like I would have an opportunity for one,
You didn't take it,
and I didn't take it. And it might just be more like cymbal kind of stuff where it was just not pulling away from that. But it was also a large band. I mean, we had several horn players. It was a big band, you know.
Yeah.
So there's only so much you could do anyway. But I was like, okay, well that's all right. Like I was consistent. My time's good, and then. In the band that I played in college and stuff, I feel like I had some decent fills, but it was definitely like, it was music that I wasn't used to either. So I know I sped everything up.
Yeah.
Like we would play just, you know, some old rock and roll tunes. And I was like coming from this metal perspective of like, nah, we're going to energize this a little bit.
Yeah.
But lately, like what I found, and I don't know, maybe this is a block and maybe I'm trying to justify, but I'm like starting to identify as like a pocket drummer.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been kind of working on. And maybe I just like hold on to that as opposed to trying to flourish all over the kit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's good.
Absolutely.
But am I also using that so that I don't have to like worry about fills too much?
It's a good question. You know, I think you got to just be clear about the goal. Where do you see yourself? What do you want to shoot for?
Yeah.
You know, certain gigs require you to be able to do soloing and setups and fills. Some gigs don't do that or very minimal, and you just got to shoot for what you really want to spend your energy at. And certainly being a pocket drummer is a smart way to go.
Right.
In terms of being a working musician, that's where it's at.
And I do love the feel, and I can sit there and dance with it in a way that's just really satisfying to me.
It's very satisfying.
But one of the kind of creative ideas I have right now is like, you know, I told you before I was talking to another drummer who was in a trio with all other drummers. I mean, he was playing guitar,
right?
But they had vibraphone and then they had drums.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what was going on. And he's a drummer on guitar.
Yeah.
He, you know, really kind of goes back and forth between them. I was like, that would be amazing. Like maybe what I want, just give me a bass snare hat situation in a ride and give me a percussionist. You know, like, let's get some vibes on board. Let's get the percussionists. Let's get, you know, keys. Let's have them cover the low end. Like, whatever it is, let's just get a bunch of percussionists and drummers on stage to see what happens, but still covering melody in like a satisfying way, you know?
It's good. I like it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Focus your energy on what you really want to spend yourself time doing, you know, out there. They're all valid approaches, and different styles require different things of you. And you're talking about the drum machine thing.
Oh yeah.
Which I find interesting because because of drum machines now, drummers are expected in certain situations to be like a drum machine, have that accuracy.
Yeah.
And it's an inhuman accuracy, but that's the bar has been raised to that. And developing that skill can take one very far, professionally speaking. So I was going to say that it alters our own playing. It's altered what we do.
Yeah.
And I remember learning to play grooves that were drum machine grooves.
Yeah.
That were almost humanly, like no human would actually play that.
Right.
But you have to do that. So in a way, it's kind of and I think of the Dilla stuff. I think that primarily came out of the drum machine stuff and programming and Ableton. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding. I'm not sure.
He started out in some form with like when he was taking samples, he would slow down tape, and he would like he opened up a double deck tape player, and to record on one so that he could start adjusting the speed, because it wasn't a variable speed recorder, but he would do it by hand.
Okay, so it's a technical start.
Right. So it started, means. Yeah. And so then it was what he had, to be able to like hear something different out of the recording that was just played.
Right.
Which is kind of genius in its own right, because his
Absolutely.
samples have like become something that's completely different and no one would ever guess came from what it did, right?
Yeah, and so the thing about that, now there are cats that can play with that feel.
Right.
Which blows my mind.
I know.
I've tried it. It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Spaven
is a good. Do you know Spaven? He's a UK drummer.
No.
Oh, yeah. He's great.
God.
Yeah.
In a way, you're hip to Errol Garner.
Mm-mm.
So Errol Garner was this old school piano. Misty was his big hit.
Okay.
But the way he played, left hand, right hand, there were almost two different bodies, two different time flows, and it pulled against the time. I mean, like his body was pulling against itself somehow.
Yeah.
He managed to do this. Sorry, and it's an example of these certain kinds of playing and cultures of music that have these things that are in the cracks. It's not this rigid grid thing,
right,
that we come to be. Well, at first associate that with drum machine playing.
Yeah.
And mimic, play like a drum machine, exactly on the grid. And now we're taking the drum machines or recording the drum machines and tweaking it. So now we have to play kind of like, not like a drum machine, but
not quite human.
Not quite human. So let's try. And in the right hands, it's created some amazing, creative, mind-blowing music, and it's always moving ahead, which is amazing. But the thing about the thing that one realizes as a drummer, an older drummer, is that there's certain things you can't relate to anymore.
Right. Like there's only so many software updates, right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to deal with, but that's just what it is,
Uh-huh. But also, like, it seems to me like, I mean, I was kind of shocked, like, because I was just learning about Dilla, even though I'd listened to all his music when I was, like, younger, like, just in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like, I was listening to all that, but I didn't know who Dilla was. And in part because they had, like, a collective of producers that were going on at the time, and not everyone got their name known. It was almost a socialist, like, group.
Okay.
Like, so Q-Tip was a part of this. It's called the Yama. Q-Tip, he was part of the Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
Dilla was on there, a couple others. But anyway, so so that was also a part of the reason you didn't quite know, but you knew the sound when you heard it. And so, but in any case, like, but I mentioned it to you because I just read the book and I was like, I want to play like this. And you're like, oh, you're talking about, I said Jay Dilla, and then you like spouted off, oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Chris Days is another guy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Monster. Yeah. Out of this world. Yeah. But just knowing that stuff too, like, and having that experience for you, like teaching has been as much a part of your musical identity as drums, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you can't separate them. So like, it seems like teaching, like you were saying too, like being involved, like teaching Berklee students and having to stay on top of what's up, and what's new and coming up, like that's got to be good for the brain. It
is. I mean, but the fact of the matter is, if someone said, hey, I want to learn how to play Dilla grooves, I would say, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
I can introduce you. I've heard some things. There's some techniques I'm familiar with, but it's not where I'm at. I wouldn't be qualified.
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah. And I don't know who is really, because I mean, I know even like in that book, Questlove does it, but it like changed his brain in a big way because he was already making his name as someone who could play like a drum machine. And then he heard Dilla's beats and he was just blown away.
What is this?
And so then he went back to the shed himself and just like tried to relearn everything.
And so like
and this was like mid-career. I mean, early career for him.
Yeah, at a certain point in your career, you can kind of say, okay, I should learn this. I'm going to learn this. And you go and you learn it.
Right.
But I've heard some, you know who Jacob Collier is?
No.
Brilliant vocalist. He plays everything. He started doing YouTube videos in his little room when he was 12 or something.
Okay.
Anyways, technically proficient with the recording and Ableton. He's a genius. Amazing character. But anyways, he explained this. I saw some clinic he did where he talked about this. And he's written music about this. And one of his approach or I don't know where he got the idea, if it's Dilla's idea, who knows what it came from. And I have ex-student of mine who's been working on this as well. And what it turns out, if you start thinking about subdivisions like groupings of 7s or 5s,
mm-hmm.
and you can get those internalized,
okay,
consistently, you can start approaching the vibe of a Dilla groove.
Yeah.
It's a very mind-heavy approach, and it takes a lot of practice. And I play with it a little bit, and you can imagine, if you boom, right.
Sure.
That's 16-note subdivision. You put a 5-note subdivision, it's going to sound a little awkward.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, but it's not that. So it's a way into the awkwardness of it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because Dylan never thought about it in these ways.
Sure. Of course not.
And, he had the benefit of having the consistency, like he could set it into motion and it might not repeat for 26 bars, but it's there. So you can go back on it, but and then it's also kind of the same thing that happened with any of the other Afro-Cuban or West African sourced rhythms that we come to, right? It's this idea, it's the swing. It was mind-blowing at the time.
Mind-blowing.
To start
that was
swinging.
The new thing.
Right. Or to play in these weird time signatures that were not on a count of 2 or 3,
yeah.
Right? And so there's this piece of me that's well, if I just listen enough, I don't need to count. And I can just find it. And maybe that's a more natural way to go about it, as opposed to trying to get all these grids in my mind.
You should probably be 3 years old,
right,
and restart from there, and you have a good chance of. Otherwise,
totally.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Up to a certain
just
point.
The amount of time it would take. Yeah. I mean, and I think you can kind of get the feel for it, if you just start, because what they all say is his rhythms are someone gave a 3-year-old a shot of tequila in a drum set, and then it was go play, and that's what it's like. And so, it is kind of, you just mess around with it and you just flub and you just try to lose all track of time. And I that's how I've practiced it. And I was I can start to see it. But, the thing in drumming is if you can come up all the time, I come out with licks that are just sweet. I can't repeat them though. And that's when you have it. You have to be able to repeat it, to own it. Otherwise, you're just exploring, which there's value in, but you got to go back and figure out how you did that,
Yeah. Like I say, you'll never be bored. There's always something to learn, right?
Yeah. Is there anything else you feel would be helpful for listeners to know when it comes to drumming or the difficulties?
Yeah, I would give one tip. And this is something that aging has helped with this. The goal, I think, on any gig is to be musically present with the people on that stage. Mm-hmm. Nothing else is more important than that. Not the ego, not who's watching me, not embarrassing myself, not I want to impress this person, not I want to work out this lick.
Mm-hmm.
All these things, or I want to impress this musician I'm playing with. I want to show him I can do this shit. All that shit that goes through our mind.
Yeah.
As professionals, coming up, I tell you, man, that the more you can get away from that, letting that ego just go away, and just lose yourself in the music and what do you want to do in this music at this very moment right now,
mm-hmm.
and nothing else. That makes it frees you up. So it's so refreshing. God.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky in this, and I've only sort of tripped on this big time after moving to Asheville.
Oh, really? And when did you move to Asheville?
About 4 years ago.
Okay.
And so, because, having switched a lot, I basically left my music community that I've had for my whole life, Bay Area, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm a nobody in a small music community. So I lost all my references, all my connections, everything, starting from scratch. having become aware of the mental traps one gets into in their life as a drummer and a musician and a professional in a region and in a community, all the mental ego things that happen that we all deal with, and wanting to not repeat that here, to be free of that. And this has allowed me to free largely myself from that stuff.
Yeah,
all that stuff.
So yeah, changing geography can help.
It can,
right? And like different crowd, different community.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's amazing. Like people, sometimes the advice is given like, well, you just have to make the place you are the place to be. And there's some truth to that in different situations. Like, sometimes you can't always just pick up and go somewhere else.
Right.
But there is some form of that. Like maybe it is like a different genre, a different style, or a different club or whatever it is that you can go to kind of like break out of that mindset to kind of open the door for seeing that. But that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean you've been a successful drummer for a long period of time, and so for just within 4 years to find that new lease.
Yeah, a new community, a new group of musicians, and new possibilities, and getting rid of old fears and insecurities and goals and ambitions. Yeah, and there's also this point where you realize, you can't aspire to certain things. As you get older, the window of things you can aspire to shrinks.
Okay.
And that's just the fact of the matter.
Uh-huh.
And as you come to terms with that, in a way it's very freeing, because you're just dealing with what is the essence of what do you want to do with your life. And I want to be a creative musician. That's all I want to do. That's the only thing that I want to do in terms of writing and playing. And I have the luxury of not having to grind it out 3-4 gigs at weddings and being, basically wallpaper at a gig where no one's listening because I'm getting paid well. I don't have to do that so much anymore. So it's been an interesting trip moving to Asheville.
Nice.
Freeing from some things. So those are my tips.
Nice. What was the impetus for moving out this way?
Finances.
Uh-huh.
We bought our place outright. You couldn't do that in California.
Right.
That's settled. My wife's best friend lives in D.C. Her sister lives in Lexington, Kentucky. Asheville, when we came here, it's an art-friendly town. It's got a hippie vibe, so it feels kind of like home.
Yeah.
Surrounded by ugly stuff, but
right.
We have to adjust to that. Can't have everything.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, and it's a beautiful place. And we're kind of in a sweet spot in terms of natural disasters so far, anyways.
Right.
So, it's been a good move.
Well, good, man.
Yeah,
well, I'm
man.
glad you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, well, I'll have to get some more lessons, and I think this is super helpful, so I really appreciate you making the time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Cool, man.
All right. What? 15.
Yep.
Wow. Drums are tuned a certain way.
Yeah, that lower
Play a
tone
certain way, yeah.
was that's kind of sounding like a basketball right now.
Are these 15?
16s. It all happened because I had